economy going where he lived, and he was a very prosperous man. He was no doubt, being the godly man he was a great employer. Treated them right. Gave them those bonuses when they needed to have those bonuses. Give them the adequate time off when they needed the time off. No doubt he was a great employer. He was a faithful father and a loving husband. And also he was hardworking. He was dedicated to fairness and morally upright. This was the man. And you say, well, you're kind of embellishing things. I don't think so. Because God himself also testifies before his archenemy, Satan. And he says that Job himself, there is no one like him. There's no one like Job on the face of the planet at that time. That was quite an accommodation by God. And so I'm thankful that there was a man named Job, because we find ourselves in those situations where we suffer. That something's brought on to us. Maybe it's just a common head cold that drives us crazy. And you feel like you just want to cut your head off, and replace it, or something like that. Or maybe you have some kind of disease that you're fighting with. Maybe you got a bad heart, a weak heart that you're dealing with, and you have these questions of why, and we can go back to Job, and we can study this in depth, and we can say, thank you, Lord, for someone that knows exactly where I'm at. Thank you for walking that path in front of me so that I know how to conduct my life. I'm thankful for this book. I'm thankful for Job, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to be able to study this great man and the work that God has done in his life. But how did he respond? Really? Do you remember last week, if some of you weren't here? He responded in an amazing way. And it's probably an amazing way in which we remember in the back of our mind, and it sticks with us. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return. He came into this world with nothing, he'd leave with nothing. That's a basic concept we have in life. We know that. But yet understand that the stuff in between is stuff that God gives to us, entrusts to us. Not just gives to us, but more entrusting to us. And he has the right at any moment, at any time, to take the stuff away. And the stuff will be taken away. It will all be taken away. If he decides earlier on than what you expected, then so be it. Because as Job understands it, and as he communicates to us, that the Lord gave and the Lord has taken away, blessed be the name of the Lord. That's tough to swallow. Some stuff we can get over rather quickly. As a matter of fact, some stuff, please, Lord, do take it away. And then other stuff we hold close to us. And maybe you never get to that point. Shame on us. We need to get to the point, we must drive ourselves to the point where we bless the name of the Lord. God, you took it away. You gave it, and you took it away. Blessed be the name of the Lord that you allowed me to have it for that amount of time. God, you are so good. Thank you. And beyond my self-centeredness and beyond my understanding, you took it away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. But it's difficult. It is really difficult. Because when the stuff is taken away, you have to deal with it. The next day comes and you have all of these pieces now that you have to pick up and you have to move on with your life, as Job and his wife now are faced with. They lost their wealth. They lost it all. All the things that they know that they have dealt with their whole life, and especially their children, are all gone. Now they have to move forward somehow. How do they do that? But now they have to do it. And so as we continue to move into this historical event of the life of Job, this account, we move into chapter 2. And I invite you to turn with me there, and we're going to read those first 6 verses. Chair Bibles, it's on page 417. And you're going to be hearing some of the same words that we heard back in chapter 1. It's the normal reporting day for Satan, and God asked him the same question as he kind of probably always does, maybe for thousands of years. And he's going to ask him, and Satan is going to give him a generic answer, like we heard before. Verse 1. Again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord. And Satan also came among them to present himself before the Lord. And the Lord said to Satan, "From where have you come?" And Satan answered the Lord and said, "From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down on it." And the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil? He still holds fast his integrity, although you incited against him to destroy him without reason." Then Satan answered the Lord and said, "Skin for skin, all that a man has he will give for his life. But stretch out your hand and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse you to your face." And the Lord said to Satan, "Behold, he is in your hand, only spare his life." That's a tough situation. We see that same type of conversation coming around. Have you considered Satan? Have you considered Job? I know you're going to give me the generic answer. You've been all over the place, but have you considered him again? He's went through the process. He went through the ringer as you gave him the last several days, and he is still that faithful, blameless person. But Satan comes back and he says, "Yeah, but you still had that tight hedge around him. You did not really give me a fair test here, God. You are going to allow me to really give this a fair shake, and you did to some point, but you still had that hedge of protection around his very being, his very physical body. Let me go ahead and advance in this test. Let me go ahead and touch his health. That will be the breaking point. We can deal with the loss of you. He can get more sheep. He can get more camels. He can get all of those other things and maybe even some more servants, although he probably had a relationship with them. And he can deal with those as painful and difficult as it is. But yet touch his physical being, touch his very heart, the aches and the pains and the intensity of that, then he will break. So he comes up with this new deal. He comes with a new deal because Satan knows people very well. We're selfish people. We love our bodies, right? Well, some of you say, "I don't really love my body. I don't worship it like some of the athletes that you might see this afternoon playing football. You know, they really worship their bodies, many of them. And there's other people that really get into it, of really worshiping their bodies. And somewhere, we need to take care of our bodies, but somewhere we cross a threshold. But really, for all intents and purposes, we like our bodies. We want to take care of it, and we guard it. We'll do whatever we can to sidestep the pain and the suffering. We don't like our bodies getting inflicted. And we will do whatever it takes to prevent certain things, any suffering, any pain, and even to prolong our life on this earth. So God, if you really touch his life, allow me to the freedom of breaking his health, and then he will curse you to his face. And so God consents to that. Go ahead, but only spare his life. Don't take that last breath out of his lungs, and don't allow that heart to stop beating. Outside of that, short of that, you can do whatever you want. Man, I'm glad that Job knew nothing about this prior to it. That would scare you to death. That'd make you want to jump off a ledge. I don't want that, because Satan is so smart, so intelligent. He knows your body better than you know it yourself. He knows he's watched thousands of people live their life. He's watched you live your life, and he knows just how much your physical body can take. He knows how the limit. He knows what kind of suffering and what kind of anguish that he can drive it to the very point where your heart will just stop beating. He knows what that is. And he's going to take full advantage of it with Job. That's scary. That is really scary. But yet this is the free ticket that God has given to Satan to infect Job's body. Let's continue to read on these next few verses. Verse 7. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and struck Job with loathsome sores from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. And he took a piece of broken pottery with which to scrape himself while he sat in the ashes. Then his wife said to him, "Do you still hold fast your integrity? Curse God and die." Stop there. It's one of these things that I'm not sure how much we really understand the suffering that he went through. I was going to show some graphic pictures up here on the screen, but they were gross. To the point where maybe some in the audience will be repulsed. I didn't know if there were younger eyes that maybe parents wouldn't appreciate me putting pictures of some grotesque bodies that have been infected with skin disease, with leprosy, with sores, and all of those things of what happens to... I can tell you, I'll tell you verbally, but seeing the pictures is a much different level of heinous suffering that Job would have had. But when he was affected by these things, he was also dealing with some other things that very day. And I don't know if it was the immediate day after that he buried his sons and daughters and his servants. I don't know if it was the immediate day or maybe there was a few days later. But it was on the onset. It was after those things occurred. And the older you get, you realize maybe you overdid it. The morning of, the morning after. You get done digging those graves, those 6-foot deep graves, and you put those bodies down in there. I don't know, maybe it had some hard ground, but really, whatever it was, his body was probably suffering physically from all of that physical work that he was doing, no doubt. He was dealing with the mental anxiety that comes with that. And as he would awaken that next day, he had to cope with that, but also he had to cope with something else that was occurring, something that he never felt before. Maybe some aches and pains that was being brought on from Satan's persecution that he was putting on Job. I don't know. But regardless, there was some suffering going on within his body. The aches of the joints, the stinging of pain that was being brought on through the skin disease that was happening. And as his body would rub against each other, maybe his arm against his side or his legs rubbing together, he would feel the agony of the tenderness of skin. And then he would notice that there were some red spots that were welling up on him, all over his body from the bottom of his feet to the top of his head. And those red spots were starting to puff up. And there were fluids building up in those in those swellings and pus and bodily fluids that were beginning to break open and oozing out in the tenderness underneath that skin. And it was all over. It just wasn't on his arms or his legs. It was from the top to his head, to his bottom of his feet. And they were all over. They were even inside of his mouth, perhaps. And his wife would look inside and seeing that swelling up of those spots, the pus and all of that stuff inside his mouth, all over his body. And he was dealing with that. No matter if he sat up, whether he laid down, there was pressure against that tenderness of skin. That skin, no doubt, that was attracting flies as well. Then the infection that was setting in, and he was to deal with this for an extensive amount of time. Think about that pain. Think about that difficulty that he had to deal with that. With that redness and that irritation of skin and the swelling and the infection. And then when you peruse through the book of Job, you see all of these things that I have up on the screen behind me. He would deal with all of that because of the suffering that Satan was putting upon his body. No doubt, Job would endure countless sleepless nights, and his friends, his acquaintances, forsaking him. But he did have 3, and they turned out to be not so encouraging. We're going to be talking about them beginning next week. I hope you don't have friends like Job had. But anyway, we'll save that for next week. He had to deal with his suffering, this infection that was setting in, and then he also had his wife. You heard the verse that I read in verse 9. Now, oftentimes, we preachers or teachers kind of really give her a black eye. She didn't sound like too great of a wife to live with. I want to cast a different light on this lady. I want you to understand that she was dealing with just as much suffering as Job was. She was dealing with all of the grief that he was dealing with, from the loss of the financial wealth, from the loss of the servants, from the loss of all her children too, dealing with that grieving process, and now she had to come and look at her husband. I don't know what he was doing, laying in bed, sitting up, whatever he was doing, he was dealing with all of this abnormalities of his body that was taking place, and all the infections that were going on, and she had to look at the suffering of her husband. There was probably a suffering equal to Job's. Maybe she didn't feel the physical pain, but her anguish was just as deep as Job's, as she had to watch her husband. Maybe in the back of her mind, being a mother, that she would say, "Then I wish that I could change places with you. I would do anything. It would be easier if I took this suffering on my body than to watch you with your suffering." Or maybe your child. No doubt your child. That 2-year-old child suffering. And you would say, "I would do anything to trade places. Please, please, please." And so the depth of her sorrow was equal to Job's. And she had to come in and deal with that. She had to deal with that beside her husband's body. And she comes off with this comment. As she's walking through this journey of life, are you still going to hold fast to your integrity? Knowing that the very one word that would characterize Job's life is integrity. This is the road that you've gone down 40, 50, 60 years, however Job was. This was the road that you walked, and you walked it very well, like no other person. Is this the road you're going to continue to walk on, Job? Are you still going to hold fast to that integrity? Is this the game plan for your life, for our life? Are we going to do this? But this road is coming to a very ugly part. A road in which I don't want to travel anymore. I can't bear it anymore. Is this the game plan? Is this the road? Maybe it's time to just change it a little bit. Interesting, she picks up on this word integrity. She wasn't part of the conversation between God and Satan. But yet she says, "Do you still hold fast to your integrity?" We heard that from God. Remember, God said He still holds fast to His integrity, although you incited me against Him to destroy him without reason. There was something very unique about that man, Job. That integrity that he lived. It had God's attention. It had Satan's attention. It had, no doubt, if it had God's attention and Satan's attention, no doubt it had all of the spiritual realm's attention. This man lived a life like no other person, full of integrity. There was no one like him. There is something very special about integrity in one's life. Even among mankind, we take notice of those people. Can you imagine if we had a politician that was full of integrity? He or she would stand out, wouldn't she? She. Them. Maybe we better watch out what gender we're pointing at. If we had a politician that was full of integrity, we would be amazed, let alone just a normal citizen. And we would take note of that person. So integrity. No doubt Job was the picture of that. But also, Job's wife said something else on the second half of that conversation between God and Satan. She talked about this cursing God business. Just curse God and die. You walk the road very well, and you've done it so good, and Job, you and I are by yourself. Just go ahead, say it. Just curse God and die. Just move on with life. I won't tell anybody. Just move on. Curse God and just move on. And that's the very thing that Satan wanted Job to do. There was something far greater going on here than the world in which Job and his wife lived in, and also the land that they walked on. There was something in the spiritual realm that was far greater, and it's the life of integrity, and it's a life that would curse God. And it's very significant that we walk in the right direction. Job knew that life. And yet, Mrs. Job, we'll just call her that, she was driven to the point, I'm done. I'm just done. I'm done with the journey. Let's just cash in our chips, if you will. And let's end the pain and the suffering. And let's try to get some pieces. Let me try to pick up some pieces. Let me try to get some peace and to finish this life. And you think to yourself, why in the world did she do that? Job understood that he was dealing with a hurting spouse. And maybe you are one that right now, you are dealing with a hurting spouse. You are one way or the other. And maybe your spouse is enduring such persecution, such difficulty, they don't need to hear more words that would tempt them to walk in a way that they should not be living. What Job needed to hear more than anything was someone with the perspective that even if it was just in front of them, they needed to help them to endure the suffering in their life. We need to guard our words, and one day I might be in that boat, or you may be in that boat. Maybe you're going through it now, or you may be in that boat one day, and your spouse will be suffering greatly, physically. And when you are in their presence, you need to control your thinking the very best that you can, and the words that come across need to help them through their suffering. And don't think you understand what that suffering is all about, because you really don't. We are so limited in our understanding. Sure, you as a spouse understand your spouse far greater than anyone else, no doubt. But understand you're not God. You don't understand the big picture, and you don't understand what they're going through. Job needed to hear somebody that would help him. At this time, he needed to have a wife that would say, Job, whatever you do, stand fast. Stand fast in your integrity. This is the road that you've been walking, and it's been incredible. It's been amazing. And certainly you've got the attention of everybody on the face of the planet. You've got the whole heavenly realm looking in on your life. And Job, you can do it. You can do it. If you have one more breath, or if you have 1,000,000 breaths left, then you can do it, Job. Stand fast. Stick to the stuff. He needed a wife that would stand closely beside him. And whatever road this journey goes on, I will stand with you. Please don't compromise. God's put your feet on this road, and stick by the stuff. But yet Job, he knew this was another temptation that he would have to face. And at this point, this was the greatest temptation above all. All of the grieving, and now his wife trying to nudge him on. It was difficult for Job. How was he going to deal with this? He has a great response here. Verse 10, let's just pick up on that last verse. And Job says to her, "You speak as one of the foolish women would speak." And I read it that way intentionally that time. Shall we receive good from God? And shall we not receive evil? And all of this, Job did not sin with his lips. I paused there intentionally, because he knew that he was dealing with a wife that was really not herself. She was dealing with something that caused her to not speak in the way that she normally does. She was acting as an ungodly person, one that was unwise, that really wasn't like her. She was speaking as one that was unwise, ungodly. And he had enough wits about him, even through this great suffering, that he knew that his wife was suffering so deeply. Emotionally, she was driven to the point where she couldn't go on. She just wanted Job just to end the suffering right now. But he also understood his own role in life. Job was a servant of God. And he knew really that really was his life that he was leading on this journey. And he understood that everything that he came into his very presence, into his being, was directed by God himself. And he speaks this amazing phrase. And we've heard this a number of times. And we should really maybe write it down on a card, stick it on the refrigerator, stick it on our computer screen, stick it on our dashboard, because all of a sudden, tragedy happens. Boom! Somebody cuts you off. Somebody in a very simple way, and all of a sudden, it just ruins their day. How did that happen? God, you only bring the good. You only allow the good stuff to happen. You don't bring on the bad stuff, and that's really what I signed up for, right? I only signed up on your team because you're good, and you only bring the good stuff. You only bring the health and wealth and prosperity, and that's really the kind of God that you are. And anything else, I don't receive it really as from something other than God. But God has allowed those things to happen. You're His servant. And He opens up His hand and He allows those things to happen. And we have no idea. And don't even think you can comprehend all of it. Don't even try. But somehow, even among the depth of His suffering, He says that, shall we receive good from God and shall we not receive the evil? I don't understand that. I don't know if I'll ever grasp that. I don't know if my arms will ever fit around that. It's too big for me to grasp. But somehow we need to just allow it to come to us. God, you are much bigger than I understand, and you are doing something far greater, and I don't understand it even now. Typically we hear, boy, if that's the God He is, I don't want to serve Him. I've heard it. And maybe you have too. If that's the kind of God that brings the tsunamis on China or wherever the tsunamis take place, or the earthquakes or the tornadoes that happen, or whatever that happens, if that's the kind of God He is, I don't want to serve Him, and they proclaim that they're atheists. I'm just going to deny He lives, and that'll fix Him. I'll go do whatever I want. At least I can handle whatever comes in my way. Or so you think. And yet God holds the world in His hand. And he controls everything that happens in this world, and especially in the life of a servant. He understands and He knows far better what you and I need for the greater economy of all of eternity. And so Job's question really causes us for greater thinking. Doesn't He have the right as the Creator and Lord to do whatever He chooses? Doesn't He, as a potter, have the right to tell us as a lump of clay what you're going to do and be? Have you ever worked on a potter's wheel? I did when I was a kid in school, and take that lump of clay and right on the wheel, and around she goes. You dip your hand in the water, and you bear down onto that clay, and you push. You use that force, and you form it, and you press it down around, and never once, and I haven't done that many lumps of clay, but I know that not one of those lumps of clay ever looked back and said, hey, listen, I don't want that. Don't press down on me so hard. I was pretty content with the lump that I was. Just leave me alone. Put me back in the earth and let me do my thing. It didn't happen. And I don't think it ever happened in the course of mankind. What right do I have as a lump of clay to turn around and tell God, you don't know what you're doing. Don't bear down on me. And He is the great shepherd. And we don't tell Him, don't lead me in that pasture because it looks greener over there. We're good about that one, aren't we? We sure are. And yet when I go astray, He puts His hook around me and pulls me back in. That hurt, God. What did you do? I don't think you know what you're doing as a shepherd because that one really hurt. Why did you break my leg? Because I wander off. I had hurt that breaking of the leg, and I didn't want that breaking of the leg, and it does no good. At least I think. But God, being the loving, caring shepherd, knows exactly what I need, and He does according for our good, ultimately for our good. Job's point was this: we serve a God who has the right to do whatever He does, and is never obligated to explain it or ask permission. We may never understand it. Even at that, we serve a God whose plans are way beyond our comprehension. So understand that. Job grasped that. And we need to get ourselves there. I want us to think about this. Isaiah 55, and maybe you want to write that verse down too. And I'm going to show it to you up on the screen. And it goes like this: for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. We don't even come close to being on the same plane as God and His thinking. If we were, what kind of a God is He that you would want to serve? He's way beyond. We're not even begin to understand all of the things that He does. And so we as His servants must say, I don't know why these things are happening, but I do trust you. And maybe that's a good response that we need to have, because when the world looks into our life and saying, why does this happen? Why did that happen? I don't know why these happen, but I trust God. He is the Creator. He is my loving, gracious Lord, and I trust Him far greater than I trust myself. And God, you do whatever you feel is best. And so maybe the things that we need to pray as we pray back to Him, maybe is there something that we need to learn? Then may I be a student of the suffering. Or maybe is there something that someone else can learn? Allow me to be the faithful teacher in the pain. And I've watched some of you that have dealt with those levels. And I have been your student. Maybe you haven't noticed it, but I have. I really have. I've been watching. I've been taking careful notes in my mind, and I've been watching because I may walk the same road as you one day. I don't know. But I thank you. I thank you for those that were faithful. Thank you for showing me how to walk the road in front of me, because I may be doing just that right in your footsteps. Thank you for being the faithful teacher through the pain. And maybe we just need to pray back to God. Just get me through this. God, hold me close. I'm not going to curse your name. I'm not going to put the blame on you. I'm not going to turn my back on you. I just want you to hold me. I just want you to help me through the suffering, through the pain. Make me to be the vessel that you want me to be. Good times or bad times. But can you imagine Job knowing that his life was in God's hands because he was His servant? And he knew that he had a limited understanding. But he knew that one day, and it wouldn't be long, that he'd be in God's presence. He would be in heaven itself. And as he would draw this last breath of this polluted air, in more ways than one, that we live, not only the factory pollution and the car exhaust, but also the more potent is the sin polluted. And as he drew his last breath in this sin-polluted world, this garbage-polluted world, and he would take in his first breath into his lungs of that celestial air, Can you only imagine that? And then he would take a look around and he would see the panoramic view of heaven itself. And maybe for the very first time ever in Job's life, he would say, so this is the reason why. And I'm very convinced that this will be it. If we want to understand everything in detail, this is the point that you will understand. I don't have any questions about that. You will understand it all. And I wonder if those are the tears that begin to flow down our face. As we say, you are more than fair and loving and caring. I only wish that I had more faith to trust you on that little brief journey in life. But I was so faithless. I was so nearsighted. I could not see beyond my own nose, my own pain that was racking through my body. I could not see beyond this. And even if I was suffering, God, I needed to have more faith and trust in you. Folks, we only have this one life. This very short journey. And we need to get it through our thick heads. That regardless if it's good times or if it's bad times, God is the one that's in control, and we must accept whatever His sovereign control would provide.